on the News Channel 5 network. This is OpenLine.
Hello everyone, welcome to OpenLine. It is the night before the mayoral election here in Davidson County, Nashville. Tomorrow is voting day for Nashville's next mayor and of course council members, council member at large. What we're talking about is voter turnout, not just in that race, but in races all across Tennessee. Why does Tennessee rank so lowly when it comes to voter turnout, and what can be done about it? What are some of the causes, and what can be done about it? It's an interesting story to tell. We have with us Tequila Johnson, co-founder of Equity Alliance. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So Equity Alliance, what is Equity Alliance?
So the Equity Alliance is a local nonprofit organization. Our mission is to get more minorities engaged in the civic process. We believe in using our voting power in the fight for social justice and economic equality. So we are all things civic, from civic engagement, civic leadership, civic participation. We really think our democracy works best when everyone participates, and we want to make sure that all community members, all constituents have equitable access to the voting booth.
Very good. So Tennessee, we'll start statewide, ranks 45th in voter turnout.
Unfortunately,
and apparently we're 40th in voter registration. So we're not doing so well. Tennessee's not.
No, we're doing terrible.
Why do you think that is? What's going on in Tennessee?
So I think what we've seen is a decade of systemic voter suppression that has in turn led to voter apathy, which causes people to feel as though their voices don't matter. People don't take their civic duty as strongly as they used to, primarily because of what happens. People just don't feel like their voices matter, and it's a ripple effect. You know, we have several laws here in the state that prohibit people from having access to the voting booth, and when you do things like that, of course, voter turnout and voter registration gets lower.
And you're right. I think people feel like their vote doesn't count. Because it's very frustrating that more people aren't voting, and especially young people.
Yeah.
And you've already been looking at some of the numbers from the Davidson County race, right? The race for mayor. Early voting numbers are in, and you've kind of done some analysis of some of these numbers. What are you seeing just in the turnout, which was not that high, early voting turnout here in Davidson County in this mayor's race?
So if you look at the early vote numbers, and of course these are estimated numbers based off of some information that I got from my friends at Action Tennessee, which is a coalition of progressive organizations working to really expand the electorate here. And what we're seeing is about 10% of the early vote population was between 18 and 34. So basically 10% or less of the early voters were millennials. That's right around 6,000 people. So when you look at that, people who are from between the ages of 18 and 34, the decisions that are made now are going to affect us longer than a lot of our more seasoned constituents, and we are not deciding our future. We are leaving our future in the hands of the voters who aren't between the ages of 18 and 34.
And is it always, I feel like we've always heard young people need to get out and vote, and you know, maybe young people aren't voting as much as they should. That number's pretty staggering, that only 10% of those who have voted early are under the age of 34. So 90% are older, and I've heard that it's 74% are over the age of 50.
Yes.
So we're talking about older people are voting, younger people aren't voting. But my question to you, is it new? Is it, because we've always said, you know, young people need to get out and vote, but are things worse now as far as turnout?
From what I've researched and what I can see, things are getting worse. You know, certain elections bring out a younger crowd. Obviously, the 2008 election with President Barack Obama brought out you saw record numbers of younger constituents voting, but what happened afterwards were you saw tons of legislations and policies being passed to suppress those votes, like the voter ID laws and the laws that restricted college students from voting. So I like to think that a lot of this is just just based off of will, but we know for a fact that a lot of it is voter suppression, and in turn, that voter suppression leads to voter apathy, which causes young people to just stay home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is when we talk about only 10% have turned out. Mm-hmm. That's 10% of registered voters, right?
10% of registered voters.
So they have registered.
They have registered.
They're on the rolls. They're just not voting.
They're on the rolls for now, because here in Tennessee, we will purge you from the rolls if you don't vote in 2 federal elections. So they're on the rolls now, but they're not voting. And most importantly, they're not voting in our local elections, mm-hmm. and they're not voting early.
Do you think it will change tomorrow? I mean, tomorrow is election day. Do you think it'll be higher, or is our next mayor just going to be picked by young people aren't going to have much of a say?
I hope that it will be higher. What I think is we're going to have to see more candidates that can speak directly to those voters. But unfortunately, the way political strategy works, people speak to the people who they know are going to vote. So I think what we're going to have to see is a change in the tide, and a change in the way we engage our younger constituents.
And I guess if I were running for office, I would, and I see these numbers, I would be pretty focused on mm-hmm. an older voter.
Oh, yeah.
And so the question then becomes, I mean, yeah, okay, so I could change how I speak, and I try and speak to younger people, but they may not even show up. So I'm going to talk to that older person. Mm-hmm. At what point, how do you speak to the younger people and say, good grief, you're registered, go vote? It doesn't take that long. Mm-hmm. I think there is some frustration that people aren't voting more. You know, mm-hmm. please go out and vote. And I encourage everyone to go vote. It doesn't take long, and it's so important. But that message isn't getting through. And why do you think, is it they feel like it, I guess it just doesn't count?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is relatability. When you think about having an older person, more seasoned person, speak to an issue that they have not had to live through, like student loan debt and some of the things that we're experiencing as millennials, of course, you're not able to relay that message in the proper context. So what I think has to happen is we have to have coalitions of people who are working together outside of those that are running for office to make sure that we're able to translate those messages efficiently, and they can reach those populations. And we have several organizations like that. The Equity Alliance is one, but we also formed the Nashville Justice League, which is a coalition of some very young millennial-led groups here across the city. And we're actually out here. We've knocked on 5,000 doors. We've talked to young people. We've talked to those voters who are less likely to vote, and we're trying to get those people out to the polls. Are
young people focused on? Do you think they care who the next mayor is?
What I'll say is, just from some of the focus groups that we did in 2018, we did a very interesting one in Chicago where we had a group of young guys who were talking about why they don't go out and vote. And everyone was going back and forth, and in the end, it came down to one guy that said, I don't understand how this affects me in real time. I really don't understand how this position affects my everyday life. And so since I don't understand, I don't care. And since I don't care, it's easy for me to just disengage from the process. So we really believe that we need to, one, educate voters. And we have to start with the simple civics education 101. What does the mayor's office do? What do your council members do? How many council members are there? How many at-large members are there? I've literally had this conversation on the doors probably about 150 times.
And when you do that, do people go, okay, great, I'm going to go vote? Or do they go, you know what, no? I mean, I guess at the end of your conversation, and you're passionate, and you come up there and and you get them all excited. Do they say, yeah, I'm going to vote? Or are they still like, you know what?
Yes, there is a fire ignited in people when just that little bit of information, when they receive that, they're like, oh, okay, now I understand why there's so many people at large. This makes sense. So these people represent the entire city, and this person is within my district, and I say yes. And I hand them one of our voter guides, and they're actually able to see what that person looks like. They have information if they want to go on their website, if they want to find out more about them, and it just makes people feel empowered. Information can be empowering when you've never had access to it.
And it's been said, but it's so true, that these local elections, they impact the lives of people who live there more than perhaps even president. Mm-hmm. But I want to ask now about maybe the last statewide election. So we had a Senate race. Mm-hmm. That would have been Bredesen and Blackburn. Mm-hmm. What was the turnout there with young people? Do you have a sense?
Oh, yeah.
How did that go?
So turnout was up in comparison to the 2016 federal election. Turnout amongst 18 to 34-year-olds was up by like 1,000%. Turnout in African American communities was up like by 450%. And that was because there was a lot of excitement around that race. There were a lot of resources invested in that race. And so people like myself who are actually putting in work to go out and talk to people on the doors, there were more opportunities for us to triple, quadruple those numbers versus in the local elections where you see just, you know, we have four people that are headlining for mayor, and it's just not the same level of excitement. You saw a lot of national news around the Senate race, and people were really excited about it.
So people were excited about it, young people, and then let's go even bigger. Let's go to the last presidential race. Young people didn't really turn out nationally. I mean, I know that. I don't know about Tennessee.
No.
They didn't turn out much in Tennessee.
No.
And why? Why is that?
Well, no one can answer that question because there's a lot of people to make an estimate for, but I would say what I think or what I assume is that you have a president like Barack Obama who is so inspiring, and he gives you this sense of change and hope, and everybody's excited because this is something different we've never seen ever in our country. And then you go back to the same old story. So it's just like, we did all of this to get right back where we were. And people just did not feel that same level of inspiration and passion and hope.
And so that is an indictment of the two candidates. That would be an indictment of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And there were huge numbers of people who stayed home. There were huge numbers of people who voted under Barack Obama who hadn't voted before. Now, Donald Trump says large numbers of people who hadn't voted before, and that's true, voted in his election. But so now fast forward to the next presidential election. A year from now, we're going to be in the midst of some fascinating stuff. I mean, we're going to have the Democrat-Republican convention. Donald Trump will likely be the Republican nominee. We don't know who will be the Democratic nominee. We're seeing debates tonight and all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be a fascinating time. What do you think the turnout will be in Tennessee and across the country for young people in the next presidential election?
I really believe young people are going to turn out in record numbers. I think this next presidential election will get a ton of media coverage. I think you'll have a lot of celebrities that young people follow. People will be using social media. I think this election is going to bring out a record number of young people.
Okay. Well, that kind of sets the table for the discussion. There's some reasons you think also that voter turnout is low when it comes to disenfranchisement, and that kind of thing. I want to talk about some of that.
Okay.
And I want, of course, take your calls. There's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.